Live, everyone here. Welcome to the HIAMFT Facebook Live Monday Extravaganza. Today we have a bonanza of MFT delectables. We have Dr. Diane Gehart, who has been kind enough to join us, and she is going to be speaking with a wonderful panel of MFT students and or those interested in Dr. Gehart's work. And this is going to be a conversation between Dr. Gehart and the students to discuss Dr. Gehart's upcoming fourth edition of her wonderful MFT theories textbook, Mastering Competencies in Family Therapy, which I like to brag to say I was the one that brought it to several schools when it first came out. I said, we need to use this textbook. This is the new textbook to use. And I'm delighted that now most of the schools that I've ever taught at since that time have adopted that textbook. So congratulations, Dr. Gehart, and thank you so much for your awesome writing.
Well, thank you, and thank you for that warm introduction. Aloha, everyone. So this is writing textbooks is a really interesting position to be in, I think, in any field. And honest to God, I had no idea what I was going into when I submitted my first book proposal. I have signed myself up for the most massive literature review, in the field. Oh my God. But there's also a lot of, it's interesting because as some narrative therapists would say, you kind of get to control the narrative and you have a huge amount of responsibility and influence in writing a textbook, especially Mastering Competencies in Family Therapy is not just a theory textbook. It goes into all the clinical paperwork, diagnosis. I have a research section. There's a law and ethics section. There's a lot in there. And I've always approached this work with a real, with a lot of very conscious of the responsibility I have in writing a book like this, because it is widely used. It influences. This is like for many people, it's their first introduction to marriage and family therapy theories. And I get to tell the story. And, if you've read the book, you know that telling stories, you shape people's reality and you influence people. And it's a very large responsibility. I remember when I first started the first edition of doing my first book, it was I do come from a very postmodern social constructionist background. And there is something called appreciative inquiry, which is a type of research within a postmodern framework where you, in appreciative inquiry, you're entering into the space, or in this case, I'm reading someone's, and all the history of it, whatever was ever published on strategic therapy or structural therapy or whatever it was. And I was very conscious that I am going to really go at this with a mindset of what is there that I can, all of us can learn and benefit from, to really appreciate the wisdom in each theory. Rather than come at it from my own theoretical bias, which I did have early in my career. I was pretty much, you're collaborative or you're wrong. Doesn't sound the most collaborative, does it? I can admit, looking back, I was very biased towards more postmodern sensibilities in terms of honoring multiple perspectives and multiple realities. And so I brought to this work of writing textbooks, this what can I appreciate in every single theory out there? And over the years, because I think I'm the only living person who's done a counseling theories book, as well as an MFT theories book, which means I've studied at least 40, 50 theories, in depth. It's a lot. And I can say, though, with confidence, I never met a theory that was not at some point in my career to one of my clients a very useful, precious gift. And so there's so much wisdom in the field. Our jobs are so hard. We are supposed to be able to handle any emotional, personal relationship issue that someone would come in for to a mental health provider for. That is a tall order. And so I really try to invite everyone to have a very appreciation. I mean, yes, we're all going to find our theory that resonates with us. That's kind of our template and how we think and work. But I think it's real important to not be disparaging of other approaches, and to really do your best to have an open mind and curiosity about what is the wisdom that led to this particular theory becoming so influential that it should be in a theory textbook. So I think it's a really weighty responsibility to be able to, present these ideas in that way. The one thing I've always been, I think, blessed to do is when I write up a theory, I've been able to find whoever is living in that approach, or the leader, if the person who created it, I would have them do it, or someone they assign to go over and to make sure it accurately presents the person's ideas. And so I think, very thankful that so many people have responded and, read through, corrected, whatever my representation was of their work. So so it's a big responsibility. So that's kind of the history of just how I come at this. And and these things are like, it is a whole bizarre industry, and really all of publishing, textbooks as well as standard trade books. The last decade has just like unraveled the publishing industry. It's kind of a mess. So normally they did a new edition before the world of online platform books. Every 4 or 5 years is when you do a new edition. But because Cengage, my publisher, put everything into this MindTap, which was this kind of multimedia 3D, not 3D, but comprehensive online textbook subscription service type of thing, they actually filed for bankruptcy and reorganized and did all this crazy stuff to be able to finance moving everything online. What's interesting, I'll tell you, is that it didn't work for counseling and mental health. So this next edition, because I even use MindTap because I love it, because the videos, you have access to all these videos. I have 16 videos that teach you intervention. So if you get access to the online book, all instructors have free access. Students have to pay for it. But it has all these videos that have been done in the 21st century with diverse, clinicians and more diverse issues and much more contemporary ways of doing the work. But no one even knows that they're there because no one ended up buying the MindTap. And we had to move away from MindTap because, our graduate students in MFT use it across the entire program, and they had to pay every 6 months. They had to pay to get access, and then you use it to study for licensing exams, because I have a licensing exam and a course that uses this book. So you need to buy some kind of long-term thing. So hopefully this new book, there will be an e-edition though, that will have all the videos embedded in it. So you can keep the book in a digital way and get the training videos, which I think they're very practical. They don't just show you a demonstration session. They show you how to do an enactment. They tell you how to use EFT assessment. They teach you how to do whatever. A specific intervention is what they demonstrate. So anyway, so that's one exciting new thing that'll hopefully be in the 4th edition. I think it's going to save students money and hassle and be a nice upgrade. So, but then the other thing is, so it's almost been 10 years since I updated this book. Okay. And it's like the field has changed so much in 10 years. When I can't remember if it was the 2nd or the 3rd edition, but one of the things I've been wanting to change the most, you have the book, is, I actually met with Rana Nelson, solution focused, but she was an LGBTQIA specialist. When I created the forms and added more of that language, all that language is outdated. Some of the feedback I'm getting on my survey is, you're saying it's not transgendered, it's transgender. I'm like, but when I wrote the book, that was really what they said, I swear. So those things are just always painful to me. So I want longevity, because I don't know when I get to update this again. So on all the new forms, it's just blank. So we can use whatever language we're using in the future. It's just like your students have to write it in. It was nice to have drop-down menus for all those clinical forms. If you use those drop-down menus are disappearing, and everything's going to be blank. So people can language it in any way they want to. So students have to work a little harder, but it'll be language in a way that's, fits. So now the question is, 10 years, the field has changed so much. Clearly the forms will need to be updated around LGBTQ language. But we also have telehealth. We have several new integrated approaches in family therapy, which theories are in, which theories are out. I do this thing with the theories that I think are kind of moving out of the way. I put them into like clinical spotlight, like that's where Carl Whitaker got moved from an actual theory to like a historical clinical spotlight. But what I discovered when I went and got licensed in Hawaii and studied for the national exam is that, oh my God, like the national exam compared to California has ancient history in it. It is like ancient vocabulary. Words I have not seen used in 30 years are on that exam. So I told my editor, I said, I can't get rid of these because until it's off the national exam, I can't take it out of the book because then the book isn't useful for licensing studying. But then it's like, I want to put IFS, internal family systems, back in because it was in one version. I took it out when I expanded other sections because you can't change the page number without the publisher like going bonkers on you. They're like, because it costs them more money for every page. So it's like, what do I put in? What do I take out? So then I sent out a survey, and that's actually how Danny found me and invited me to be here today with you. But just trying to get a sense of what you all find useful or what you want to have in the book. Is there anything you think you want to take out? That's like the hard part. It's hard to take anything out, but then you end up with this it's already a massive beast. I mean, I feel like it's a massive beast of a book. But there are definitely things you want to put in. And there's so much that's happened in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, the last 10 years, the whole literature and how we language all of that has changed. That's why taking the national exam is so difficult. Even when I'm prepping people, I'm like, are you talking about the last decade of research or the decade before that? Because these questions can be old. Clearly, you're using the really old theory language. So it's really challenging. So anyway, those are, so that's kind of just an introduction. And I guess what I'm hoping to do today is to just get some of your feedback and your suggestions, requests, and just enlighten me to kind of like from a student perspective is kind of what I'm looking for. So, yeah.
Dr. Gehart, do you have anything in the book about disabilities? How different theories work with people with disabilities?
I would actually have to go back and look at my case studies because it's first and foremost a theory textbook. There is some stuff on ability in there in the clinical forms. There is some stuff in there. I'd have to look at the case studies to see if I have one related to abilities in this book. Because it is. And I do a lit review in every single chapter on applications of like structural family therapy with various diverse populations, whatever's out there. So right now I do have a team of students, ironically, strangely, from Northwest Institute. It's a long story, but that's how I met John too, long stories. And he's working with a group of students I work with in Kenya as well. So somehow I just got people around the world to like help me on projects. So they're doing that. They're helping me go fishing, but I'll put the word out and see if they can find anything. We'll probably find it for CBT. That's who we will find it for.
Because I was interested in like invisible disabilities, like a learning disability.
Mm-hmm. And where would you think that should go in a theory textbook?
That I have to think a little bit more on that. It's just because I'm interested in that because I do have a learning disability.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting with a learning disability, that makes an interesting, another issue related to the book, though, is how to present this information to various learning styles. Okay. And that's another piece of that. I don't know. Have you ever seen have you seen Mastering Competencies?
Have it, Loretta. Yes, she has it. She got it as a birthday gift 2 years ago.
Okay.
So, from her.
So Dr. Souza, like you said, and I told Dr. Gehart before that I came across her book in one of my classes, and everybody I met, I'm like, if you don't buy anything, buy 2 books, DSM and this one. And then Danny is another person. I told her, I said, you know what? Don't look at the books. Just make sure you buy this one. Danny bought it, and now she's saying the same thing. So we had this. We're not definitely your groupies, but we think this is one of the best books I came across of explaining, doing stuff, how to write a treatment plan, how to go. And I go back to your book over and over and over for every class. So thank you for writing that book. With that, and I had told you this before also, that this is an excellent book. I'm so glad. And I tell people, yes, it is a bit expensive. $100 is not chump change, but you're gonna use it over at least 5 years. So break it down for like, okay, $20 a year, then break it down a month. So it comes out to like, $1.50 a month. Is doable. That way is doable. So hopefully the new book is not too expensive, because guess who is already buying it and who is already buying as a gift also. So
well, they get no control over the price, but it was, just so you know, the origin of this book, believe it or not, was when I was a doctoral student at St. Mary's in San Antonio, Texas. There wasn't a national exam. Every state had their own exam. And my professor was like in charge of writing the study guide for the Texas Association of MFT. And I was his assistant, and he handed the whole project over to me. So it started out as a license exam prep manual. This is really where the book started. And then when I started teaching, I used it as my lecture notes and put it into PowerPoints. But you'll notice in terms of learning styles and such, and also for the licensing exam. And one of the reasons why I think it's so useful is everything is organized by vocabulary term. So when it comes time to study for that licensing exam, knowing those vocabulary words are really, really helpful. But it actually studied as a license prep guide, believe it or not.
And the consistency across the chapter, how the chapters are built.
Mm-hmm.
And then a bunch of us actually go and watch your YouTube videos. That's our background.
Yeah.
When we're studying. So my 2 cents are, when you do that, if you can add a chapter on, it's not a theory, but still about this suicidality among the young generation. Mental health is the biggest issue. So that would be coming across different areas. But if you can have a section how to reach to people, like she said, disability, and I think the DBT would be help. So does the narrative therapy, because when you say I cannot see the numbers versus I see numbers differently, I have the superpower. So if number flips for me or dance for me, now you has a different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think, and I would say. And obviously you're gonna be changing COMT 12.5, and I like that back of your book where you had that. I read your book front to back multiple times.
You read the accreditation standards? I was checking those out.
I do. No, I didn't. I haven't read 12.5 yet. No, I have not read 12.5 yet. I have read your book. Your book from very first page to very last page, back and forth.
Oh my God, thank you.
So,
I was going to take those out. I'm like, no one's reading these anymore.
I did that. It was very helpful because, 4 years down the road, what you need to know, this is your road post. Go for that. So that was very hard. I'm not speaking for everybody else. I'm speaking for a small group who reads and kind of take notes. Yes.
Yep. Oh my God. Incredible. Oh, Loretta, you are muted.
Proverbian does that. She's very thorough and everything.
Wow, yeah, that is thorough. I looked at those and I'm like, I can get a few pages back by getting rid of these, because it's like, how do I get some space back? Okay, fascinating. You actually look at those. Very good. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I am thinking I'm going to do a clinical spotlight on dialectic behavior therapy. And possibly I should probably even do a little one on trauma-focused CBT, just because in LA, at least, that's what LA County, if you need those two theories to just talk the talk and so you don't, the reason is so you don't appear stupid when you go to your job interview. And I know there's some MFT faculty who feel like these things shouldn't be in the book, but so many COAMFT programs only use mastering competencies. And so if you don't have any of the traditional theories in there, I think you end up looking poorly educated when you go on your job interviews. So I think putting those in is important. And I'm going to put internal family systems in. Does anyone have an opinion about I had it in for the second edition and I took it out because of space, because I added some other things. So I got to go put that back. It really got big in the last 10 years.
Also, acceptance and commitment therapy, is that something you'd be considering putting in?
You guys are really taking up space here, man. That's all I have to say.
But one thing I wanted to add was that I've just started reading the book, and I've been doing a little bit of research about using systemic treatments in couples therapy for people who are experiencing situational violence. So maybe adding some sections about that research. I've read a paper that's a few years old, and I'm not really sure what's going on with the research right now, because from the statistics, looking from what comes out of courts and shelters and stuff, it doesn't look too promising to have systemic treatments for IPV, but maybe for people who are just experiencing some situational violence.
There is a research section in the
Okay.
and I go over, and the JMFT in January 2022 just published their huge new research article that summarizes the last decade of research in MFT. And I do go over IPV there, and I think I cover it pretty decently. It's not, and because we go over what the research actually says, which is less than 5% of, people who go through those, long battering programs, your California work, less than 5% of them get better. That the model is the one that most people build it around, a feminist model, but it doesn't work very well. But the research shows for situational batterers, not the more severe forms of battering, and there are lots of classify that. Basically, not the antisocial batterer.
Right.
Situational batterer, where it's only the partner and the person doesn't have substance use or antisocial features. They want to stop battering. There is the last research, and I have not updated this section yet. The last research showed, and my colleague Sandra Stith and Eric McCullum did research on this with NIH.
Yeah, that's the one I read. Yeah.
Yeah, and that has better outcomes than anything, but it's only for situational battering.
Right.
What they actually found is that it's the group IPV. And you know what got through to them? Eric would tell me. He said, Diane, it's when they see the batterer across the room treating their partner in a certain way. That is the only thing that gets through to them, is watching that across the room in the group. Because when you do it individually, the same curriculum, it was not as effective. But basically, the men are only influenced by seeing other men. And excuse my language. Well, we're streaming, so I won't swear. But what a bleep they are, and that is what Eric said. Really, is what that's what what they were finding had the most impact, and why doing it in a group was so important. Because when you put a bunch of batterers together, sometimes they actually reinforce each other, and they sit there and complain about the whole system, and they do not get good outcomes. So it's a very difficult thing to treat. I think it's very much embedded in American culture in particular. We're extremely sexist culture, and yet it seems like so many people are unaware of just how compared to like Northern Europe and other similar parallel cultures, we have an unusually sexist culture, just given the rest of the characteristics of our society.
But what about couples who come in and they both are actually, the sort of situation where they're throwing things at each other and there's like mutual violence?
Yeah, that's.
Is there research that supports?
Most couples are bilateral violence. So most couples like that have that going on. But the truth is, if it's a heterosexual couple, there's still a power imbalance there. So it still needs to be treated, because basically when a man, does physically assaults a woman, she's fearing for her life. So it's much more of a classic PTSD trauma. When a woman physically assaults a man, his ego is bruised more than he's fearing for his life. So it doesn't get to the same level of trauma. There are cases, obviously, where this is reverse, and women can batter men, and women can batter to a level, and then you have same-sex, violence as well. And we actually, my university, our clinic has one of the only LGBTQIA trained DV intervention team. So there's research in there about that. And I think I briefly described that one model. I'll update the research on what works there. But I think it's definitely one of the areas where there's not a lot of, it's hard to get positive outcomes with DV and IPV. It's a very tough area to treat. So I have that in the research section. Because it's a research-based intervention, it's not a standard intervention at this time. I'll see what the research says, and maybe I'll add some more of that, some more description of that to the theory chapters as well. So yeah. So
I'd like to say something. I love your book. That's why it was really hard for me to respond to your survey. What do I take out? I'm like, I just
Nothing.
imagine at this point, what could you take out? I actually responded. I was kind of being silly, but kind of serious. Maybe the pictures.
I know, I saw that one.
Of them. But the information is so great because you can add layers of information, like putting information on about the national exam. I love that.
I am going to put a little section on how to study for the exam, since now I teach an exam course. So every section is going to get a telehealth applications and a license exam application, like what to study for your exam for national and California MFT exam. I'll update the diversity section. I'll update the research section. So those are the main, but they'll get a license section and a telehealth section. Hopefully we find something out there on telehealth for individual theories. Otherwise, I'm going to say, well, this is probably going to work online and this is probably not. So awesome.
Biggest thing I could see data therapy is like when you're doing play therapy, and if you're doing hands-on stuff to see the interaction between family, that's what you lose. So if you can add something like that across the board, that little like interaction between family members, how do you
That's
see
hard.
that when you just see like 2 or 3 people on your screen?
Yeah, couple family therapy is very difficult to do well online. It is very challenging. Thank God JMFT just published a whole journal on that, so I'll be reviewing that because it's really a literature review for the most part. I try to keep my opinion out of it. But yeah, I'm going to be very curious because that is a very challenging thing to do, the couple family work online, definitely. And child work, play therapy work is really, really difficult, young kids. So I think, and in general, my experience has been in cognitive types of interventions do much better than effective, emotionally based ones. Oh, I tell my couples, I'm like, okay, since you're not in the room with me, I can't feel the vibe, their tension rising, because I didn't realize that is like often like the tension's rising before you see it in their face. And so I said, you're going to have to tell me when one of you is triggered, because the delayed response with Zoom is so significant that you're just going to have to tell me you're triggered. If we're going to do couples therapy online, that you have to promise me, because I can't pick it up as fast and intervene as fast as when I'm in the physical room with you. So I didn't realize how truly it's like the energy in the room. You just feel the tension before you see it in their eyes, especially if you don't have a good view. My God, I had one couple who did high conflict and they were always backlit, so you could barely see their faces. I'm like, if you're going to do this type of lighting, man, you're gonna, and they do. They're like, I'm triggered. I'm like, thank you for letting me know. So yeah, I'll be curious what the literature has to say, because I think all of us have done our own little individual experimentation with online Zoom in the last 2 years and learned our own tricks. So cool. So okay. So I got some off the cuff things. So what if I go and ask you just some of my ideas and I get your feedback on what I'm thinking of doing? Okay. So the first thing is, let's see, I am I'm going to add, the major thing I'm going to do is add a chapter on integrative family therapies. And there are 3. One of is Carl Tom. So Carl Tom's the Pips, Hips, and Whips. If you have the version 3, did you guys like that Carl Tom's thing to compare across theories, or was that too weird?
I don't remember that.
Hey, Mary,
I don't remember that. Maybe you say
it's under cross theoretical comparison.
I have the word, the one before.
No, it's not in the second edition for sure.
No. And I bought the book, and as my book came home, I realized that that was a 3rd version, but by then I had read and marked everything. And I was like, I'm not spending another $100 whatever dollar. So no, so I have the version before.
Okay, yeah, that version is any cross comparison. Does anyone remember the Carl Tom pathology, interaction patterns, solution and patterns, wellness patterns? Anyone like that stuff? Carl Tom? No.
Don't remember the.
Oh, I said awesome. That's where I saw Carl Tom was on the Big Island, is when I saw him do this presentation, in fact, at IFTA about 2016, I think it was. So I love it. And I sat next to Carmen Knudsen-Martin, who during his presentation, and she and I talk about PV, we're like, finally someone does systems with power. Yay! We were sitting there the whole time, and Carmen's going to get a huge section in the book as well. She is a socio-emotionally relational therapy, which that is getting added to the narrative. It's going to now be postmodern and sociocultural approaches, but Teresa McDowell, Carmen Knudsen-Martin, and Maria Bermuda have an amazing couples therapy approach called socio-emotional relational therapy, which does a beautiful, it is by far the best way of addressing gender differences and power differences in couples. And it is done in not like the Duluth model, which is you've got power and control and you're a bad man and you bad, give up your power. Because most people don't experience that they have power and control. That's actually why they're violent, is because they feel like they don't have control and influence. So, but Carmen does this beautiful, I know Carmen, so it's Maria, Teresa, and Carmen do this beautiful invitation using a postmodern kind of inviting people to reflect on who's in charge of nurturing this relationship and who's in charge of nurturing each other, and how does that look, and are you happy with how this balances? And I agree with their point. Most, at least North American couples, we believe that we are aspiring to gender equality in our relationships and heterosexual relationships. And we believe that we're working towards that. But if you look at like a lot of the research and statistics, there's still a lot of gender, differences. The most obvious is that when both in a dual career, couple that's heterosexual, the woman is still usually doing 80% of the work, in terms of childcare and taking care of the house. Yeah, and so what this does, and the women are still typically in most families, not all, but in many families, they're still taking care of everyone's emotions. They're doing the laundry, doing the kid stuff, and they're working full time, and so looking at all of that, and it is a very gentle way to invite those conversations, to not force anything, but to invite the couple to just reflect on their gender patterns and who's nurturing, who's taking care of the relationship. Is this really, the way it's playing out? Is this what they want? And so it's a very non-judgmental, accepting, inviting people to reflect on this. And I think it's beautiful. So that is definitely going in the book, because I think it's so important, especially after the pandemic. These issues got worse, not better, for many, many families. So the postmodern chapter is going to get that expanded. I love Michael White, and his work, but, and I hate to curse a man upon their deathbed, but I swear to God, right before he passed away, he published an entirely new version of narrative therapy. And so if you look at that chapter, it is like, because they went from doing all this externalization stuff to doing a lot more of the scaffolding and language-based stuff. It actually looks a lot more like collaborative and less like, so narrative has old original narrative and new narrative. And he has the most published interventions in case conceptualization things of anyone. I look at that chapter, I'm just like, oh my God. I'm like, dude. In my dark moments of being a textbook author, I'm like, oh, what if he didn't write this last book? So, but then I asked for forgiveness, and I'm like, it's going to be a really long chapter, folks. It's going to be a long chapter. So somehow I'm going to probably trim down. I have to trim down a little narrative, because narrative, he just has so many interventions. So, and then solution focus also, there's so many new people who've created various languaging of it, that solution focus is also spiraled into a lot of extreme variations that just become hard as a textbook author. So I'll put the cert in there, which is socio-emotional relational therapy in there. Yeah.
So what is about, because Dulwich Center does this pretty much every Friday. So when you're saying Michael, when you see his intervention, and then it says, just put his book over there as a link, and then say, go check this center out. And then you can also add I love McComb's dot exercise. I think that's awesome, because I talk about it all the time. But you can just, if you don't have much space to list, you can just put like a little one chapter. And some of your stuff is repeating, like when you have a chapter on a case conceptualization, when you're talking about, okay, you are depressed, but you can think you are more sensitive, or if you are aggressive, but you can talk about you are outspoken. You talk about that on a case conceptualization, and you talk about that on two other places, about how you can flip the language. So if you can have just only one place, and then you can just say refer back to chapters,
Yeah.
and link it, then they would cut down on some length. And okay, Danny, usually I write a lot, and Danny usually chops my stuff up, because I tend to write, when teachers say 10 page, I tend to write 15 pages. Then I have to have multiple editors chopping it off for me. But so what do you think of that? Just having like one place. I know it's really wonderful, because I use your case conceptualization all the time. You spoil me for that. So,
well, and the other thing I'm doing with the forms is the case studies now in each chapter will just be the theory specific case conceptualization, and not the whole monster.
I hear you.
So that'll shorten the book a little bit. So they're going to get theory specific for each chapter, and then the long one. So here's my problem. My assumption is, my experience with my students are, if I didn't have the instructions in the cross theoretical case conceptualization chapter, they don't go back and look, and they want it all right there so they can do their homework assignment and have all the information in that chapter together. Or do you guys go back and look? Do you don't mind?
I looked. But you already know I looked. So
I know you do. You read the appendices with boring lists of like competencies. My God. I did that, so I could probably shorten that chapter by referring them back somewhat to the chapters. Yeah. And
I figured author takes time to write it. Author spends so much time. So as a readers, and besides, it gives us more knowledge, so why not?
Yeah, and I also am going to introduce a shorter version of the cross theoretical case conceptualization, a concise one. I actually developed it during the pandemic for my students. And so I'll do a shorter version, and then there'll be a longer one too. So I will shorten it up a little bit. It's a lot to grade. It's a lot to write and a lot to grade. I still think the exercise of doing the long one really helps you learn theories very well.
That's what I did when I took my classes. For every assignment, and that's what I say, I'm kind of spoiled. I make a case conceptualization for every assignment, and I still do that. Like if I have a Vinay, and if I have to write a treatment plan, I case conceptualize first, and then I write my treatment plan. So I am pretty good with that portion, because, and again, thanks to your book, I was able to do it, but I do that part. So.
So So yeah, so I can probably shorten up the case conceptualization chapter and refer people back to the various sections where they would find things. So yeah, so I will do that. Yeah, so those are the forms. So the chapters will have case studies that are purely on one theory. It won't have a cross conceptualization part. Do you all like the case studies? Are they good?
They good. They're really good. Thank you.
They helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So let's see. So yeah, so, you know, basically, I think in the introduction, I'll just be adding more the last 10 years of reviewing diversity, equity, inclusion literature, kind of going more into that. And I'm going to add the integrative chapter. So there are two, so there's Carl Tom's work, and there is something called integrative systemic therapy that is developed at the Northwest Institute by Pinsoff and Brulin, who are, they each were developing their own thing, and they kind of came together to create one. So I'm going to be adding that, and then I'm going to add my own therapy that works stuff piece in there all as well. And I'm going to try to see if I can kind of go across the chapters like I did with Carl Tom's work, so that there's just more of an integrative perspective. You know, because one of the interesting things is there is no new literature on strategic therapy or Milan or MRI. There's no new literature. The only literature that's new, that's systemic, is all the EBTs that were based off of it. So it's a very strange, you were solution focused and narrative and CBT, even Satir. Bowen, there is some work continuing in Bowen. It's slow but steady compared to some of them. Even Satir is not it's very small, and it's moved off in a direction that's more about wellness. So it's less of a therapy model per se. There's a lot of, you know, it's certainly not a therapy model that's got the sculpting that we all learn. It's got a lot more of the spiritual kind of personal development piece in it. So the Satir is kind of not as, you know, no one uses Whitaker. You can't even train in that anymore. Structural, again, you see it in all the evidence-based treatments it's used. And there is someone, you know, at the Child Family Guidance, but it's called something different. I write up all of that is in the structural chapter. But like classic structural, there's no research. There's not like, it's not like a living theory. I don't know how else to describe it. Where like, you know, I'm going to be pulling my hair out trying to review narrative and collaborative and CBT and, you know, but these other ones are going to be like drip, drip, drip. There's nothing there. So it's a real, you know, at some point it's the field, you know, if I could, I would write a historical thing and then what we're doing today and what it looks like today, but that's not how licensing exams handle it. That's not how training programs and universities handle these theories. So, but it's interesting. That's practically, if you actually review the literature, it's like this is ancient history that we're still teaching. It's ancient history, still the licensing exam. And it is used to build these EBTs that are very impressive and really incredible. And there are great ideas there. But I do think the integrative model, the IS, integrative systems therapy, is very systemic, where my integrative model is much more modern. But, you know, this is what the future is going to look like, I think, for the field. So, but the textbook can't transition there quite yet. So it's a strange time to be writing a book like this.
The case studies, you can incorporate the stuff that's really going on, like COVID, right? The trauma that COVID has caused some people, some of the new laws that recognize, let's say, gay marriage, you know, maybe more case studies that accept that. Because I kind of I feel like it's something I still have to walk on eggshells, even when I'm talking to MFTs that have been practicing for a very long time. They're not comfortable, and I don't understand it. So
Wait, what are people not comfortable with?
Well, with some of the LGBTQ issues or addressing some of the stuff that is coming out, transgender is one that people are always like, oh, but I don't, work with that. Well, why not?
Yeah,
You
that's
know?
strangely enough. I believe it's either transgender youth or one of them had, so I actually reviewed the literature on a model. This is in the third edition. So this literature is over 10 years old on coming out transgendered during adolescence to a family, and coming out gay, lesbian, bisexual to a family. So I found literature on strategic and structural. One has, I can't remember which one's in which chapter, but those are definitely in there. And it's like a 5-stage model for how to facilitate that. But I'm going to certainly look over this. I'm afraid to make COVID part of a case study because it's going to, in 10 years, is anyone going to care? That's it has to be a case study in 10 years, people care.
Okay, that makes sense.
So COVID may not be, but every couple of years we have something coming up, the avian flu, and then something else. So we can just put it generally as, or what is going on in Ukraine. So you can say social drama, or you can break it down on trauma, which is based on societal perceptions that would cover LGBTQ, or you can say, okay, there's a medical issue could have caused, but it's a pandemic issues. I do not know how to like put the correct words, but you can put it like as a generalized form, maybe that, yeah, COVID is gonna be gone, but something else is gonna be there, especially when we are, and it might not be as serious as COVID, but and when COVID come, part of the thing, when COVID come, there was a lot of ethnic and racial hatred towards specific, not just brown people, but people who are Asian. And unfortunately, people in USA are not used to separating one versus another. So that was a big thing. And it's gonna be, we are a long way away from that racial inequality. So if you can add a chapter or something on it when you're working with clients who are bigoted and the one who are getting affected by the client, that bigotry, both ways.
Wait, so to have that happening within a family or just?
Okay, like when you, okay, so when you're working with a family, yeah, I know families, somebody, and they are fighting, and they're not my clients, so I can talk about them, but they have different political views, or they have different views on who is responsible for COVID. And that would be, if you can include on it. And there was a question on marriage and family therapy, where therapists had asked a question, how do you deal with the people who are dealing with that they are being blamed as a race, who is as a white people who comes in a therapy session who are looked at as racist? How do you deal with them?
Yeah.
And there was a huge, basically there was a war of words from both sides, because the civil discussion was gone at that point. But the thing is, that does happen as a clinician. You would have a family and they say, okay, I am falsely blamed, I have never done anything, and you need to work with them. So if you have a case study like that, or on the other hand, a family comes and say, we are generationally, systematically oppressed, and how it's like a two different kind of families, but you can talk about them, right? If you can have a case study for them, that'd be wonderful.
Okay.
I just say multicultural family, multi-family, doubly gifted, have a different political views and social justice. I just throw that on a chat for you.
Yep. Yep. There's a lot. There is a lot, and that, and it's difficult, and it's interesting. I'm consulting. I've called all my friends who write in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I say, compared to every other stream of literature I review, because it's really a lit review. It's not my opinion, right? It has to be in the literature. I just can't make stuff up. I said it is such a fragmented discourse compared to like looking at systemic or postmodern. And most of the literature is about just helping people become more aware and increasing awareness, but it's not practical. That's why I love Carmen, Teresa McDowell. They have a whole socially, culturally attuned family therapy that it's kind of a meta model, putting in the beginning of the book, that you can use with any theory to increase your sensitivity and attunement. But I was shocked at how little actual, because my thing is all about practical research, how little practical research is actually out there on working with diversity. And I've now talked to about 4 experts in the field. I'm like, am I missing something? I'm going to, add decolonization and a little more post-structural. That's the only philosophical thing to add. They're like, yep, that's it, Diane. And I'm like, in terms of theory, it's pretty much Carmen's theory. There are a couple, I'll summarize what McGoldrick and Hardy talk about, but they just have a list of guidelines, like 10 guidelines. And like, when you actually sift through all of the literature, there's not much there that's concrete and practical to help the person in session, which is what my book's all about. It's more about reflecting and thinking and becoming aware. And I'm like, that is not going to go in a theory textbook that's highly practical about how to do these books. It's been a very interesting literature search, because there actually isn't a lot out there on what to do with all of these issues. There's a lot out there to raise your awareness. There's not a lot of what you do in the room with that is surprisingly thin, given how much we talk about diversity. It's like how impractical most of it actually is for the average clinician. So that is where I think, again, Teresa McDowell, Carmen Knudsen Martin, and Maria Bermuda, I believe, they had the most like applied practical, here 5 phases and steps you can do in session. Like that is what is surprisingly lacking. So I will review what is there, but I was yeah.
And that's the reason I think if you have a case studies with that, then that would give some guidance, especially to the newer therapists like us who is just up and coming and we are learning. So if you have a case studies and maybe someday I know you're doing a treatment plan with a WMF Wisconsin chapter.
Yeah.
So, but if you have, so maybe someday you write another book about treatment plans for this one.
Yeah.
But that might help. I wanted to say thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm going to have to run. I think
we all need. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know John's got an appointment.
It's a perfect segue.
Yes. I just want to thank you, everyone, for your input and thoughts and sharing your experiences. Was there anything on Facebook to be aware of?
Come through, but I did put the link to the JMFT Decade in Review.
Thank you.
So folks can access that. And mahalo, Diane, and student panel. Really just a rich conversation. I can't wait to see what comes of this in your upcoming 4th edition of Mastering Competencies in Family Therapy. And just a shameless plug for you, Diane, and your Therapy That Works program. If folks haven't had a chance to take a look at that, it's the therapythatworks.com.
Yep. Therapyworksinstitute.com.
Excuse me. Go to therapythatworksinstitute.com. Check out this wonderful training opportunity. Very practical, very hands-on. I've been learning a ton in that program, so thank you.
Thank you.
And yeah, everyone have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you sometime in the not too distant future, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Laho.
Nice to meet you, Dr. Gehart.
Nice to meet
you.
Take care,
everyone. Be well. Bye-bye.